All right. Are y'all excited? Y'all have got to be excited. ACA reporting has, well, I'll just put it this way. ACA reporting can be incredibly complicated, and obviously I'm not going to be able to fix everything in terms of your understanding, but over the next 3 hours and 15 minutes, you guys, it's going to be unbelievable, and you're going to be excited. How many have ever seen any type of seminar that an attorney has given on this topic? How many agreed with me that that must be what one version of hell must be like bad, okay? So this is not what that is. What we do from an ACA reporting standpoint comes out of my background. I spent 15 years as an employee benefit broker, had an agency, grew it, sold it to Gallagher, and decided I didn't want to be a broker anymore. I wanted to build solutions around the industry that would help these guys do a good job for their clients. So that's essentially what we do, and we're just going to kind of dive in because I've done this presentation or some like it probably 50 times to 100 times in the last year. You never have any idea what it is that we're going to get into, and especially if we go to Q&A, if we get there. So the first thing that I'm going to do is give a 5-minute understanding. We're just going to talk about the reporting requirements. We're not going to get into we can go a lot of different places, right, when we're talking about ACA reporting. So we're not going to go there. We're just going to stay with taking a look at the reporting and helping you understand a little bit of context. What I've found out is that when you get an idea of the context of what it is that they're trying to accomplish, you go, okay, well, that sort of makes sense. I sort of understand what it is that they're getting at. Also, too, the fact that a lot of you have already been through this process once by now, because the employers, is anyone here not done? Don't be embarrassed. But if there's anybody that's not done with their reporting, okay, that's good, all right, because April the 1st was the date that we had to have that done. With that being said, you brokers, y'all don't have any excuse for not writing more business. I'm just going to tell you, because you have no idea how many telephone calls we get from brokers that'll go, you know, we think we probably need to get started on that ACA reporting with our clients. That was happening this morning. So we're going, you're probably right. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. You might want to do that. And I think a lot of it was it kept getting pushed off. So people thought, okay, well, it's just kind of going away. They didn't really know what to expect. But of course, at least for now, it's here to stay. And we'll talk about that. We'll probably get into that a little bit too. Is it more payroll reporting or employee benefit reporting? I'll talk a little bit about what I've seen as the history about how everything just kind of evolved in this entire process. And anyone who's been through it knows the answer to that question. Then we'll take a look at literally a little bit of how the penalties actually are going to work, because a lot of people have done the reporting. They go, okay, great, we got this reporting done. What does that mean? And so we'll talk a little bit about those penalties. And then we'll talk about really the options that you have as an employer. We'll try not to make this 100% self-promoting. Obviously, we do ACA reporting. We think we do a pretty good job, but we're not delusional enough to think that we're the only people out there that do a good job. So, okay, what is ACA trying to accomplish in terms of the reporting? Two things, 60-55 and 60-56. The individual mandate, right? Everybody has to have coverage. And then the pay or play requirements, that if you're an applicable large employer, if you have more than 50 employees, then you have to report. And what I would say when we train employees is that you have to offer the right type of coverage at the right type of cost. That's what the reporting is about. The entire thing is about, as an individual, did you have health insurance coverage? If not, you're going to have that penalty, right? You can shake your head. Okay, all right, you're good. All right, so the pay or play requirements are, if you are an applicable large employer, then you have to offer the right type of coverage at the right type of cost, and we'll call that cost affordable, which is a long, complicated conversation in and of itself. Okay, so individual coverage, how are they going to know? Oh, here it is right here. That's nice. There's a laptop right here. I don't even have to look back there. This is so good. Okay, so how are we going to know that everybody had coverage? Okay, that is reported in a handful of different areas. And what the IRS is doing is, well, theoretically, this is what they're doing. We'll actually see. This is a side note. It's kind of interesting. Would anybody like to guess as of, and this is third off. I don't know this 100%. I wasn't in the IRS office. But would anybody like to guess how many employees they had in the AR system? Employees in that division as of the beginning of October? 2. That's not enough. I think they need more. That's just my thought. I'm thinking maybe they have more now, but 2. So As for what they'll actually end up doing with it, we'll talk about that a little bit too. So individual mandate, we all have to have coverage. How are they going to know that Mark Combs and my family have coverage? What they're going to do is they're gathering this data. They have A forms, B forms, and C forms. A forms come from the exchanges, and they're going to say, I was covered for these months. The B forms are either coming from small self-insured employers or from insurance carriers, and they're saying, Mark was covered this month, and this month. And the C forms come from a lot of you guys who are self-funded employers that are reporting that on the 1095C form. A form, B form, C form, okay? So what they do is they pull all that information together, and this is actually the A form, to where on that left-hand side, they're showing month to month. And in the B form and the C form, it looks a little bit like this. You'll have this online. That's the main reason I have this on there. And that's what it looks like. And so what it allows them to do is to pull all that information and go, okay, you were covered in January and February and March and April. Here are the months that you were not covered. And for these months, you're going to have an individual penalty. Does that make sense? Okay. So it's coming from these different areas. Okay. Who has filed their taxes? Okay. Did you guys see that spot to where you take all of the data from those A forms and B forms and C forms and use it on your taxes? Because if you did, I'd love for you to show me where that is. There is no spot, okay? It's one little line. Did you have health coverage or did you not have health coverage? This is actually what it looks like on the 1040. It's number 61. And so what is that going to mean? I guess it's just like anything in your taxes. I mean, you could lie. You actually don't even have to file your taxes if you don't want to, but that might not work out well for you in the long run. So, because they're going to have the information as to whether or not an individual was actually covered. The other reason this becomes real important is because there's a lot of brokers who've just told their clients, look, we don't, just do something. Just write something down, send something in. It's not a big deal. It doesn't even have to be accurate. That's what we hear all the time. That's a bad idea too, just simply because they're going to use the data eventually, and why put yourself in a position where it's not even necessary, honestly, if you're with a right type of vendor, and there's lots of vendors who can help you out. Okay, so how's the IRS going to know if each large employer, applicable large employer, offered coverage? That's what the 6056 is all about. Now, I know that this doesn't apply, it actually can apply to organizations like groups like this, even though everyone here is self-insured. However, you might have a division that's not self-insured. The main thing to understand is that fully insured carrier is not doing this for you. They're not doing this for you, period. What they end up doing is they do that part, that 6055 reporting. Here's everyone who was covered under the plan. They are not doing your 6056 reporting. The reason I always reiterate that is because we have a dozen calls a week that'll say, you know, we thought that the fully insured carrier was doing this for our one division, but it turns out they're not. And so it's just reiterated. One of the neat things that I think is happening, and everyone who's spent any time in employee benefits, I think that they knew that this was going to happen eventually, and the ACA might push it along, is that there's a big time consolidation, because you can't be, how do I say this tactfully? You can't be a moron and be an employee benefit broker anymore. You could for a long time, as long as you were a good sales guy, but it's just very difficult. I don't know if you've noticed that based on the presentations. It's a little complicated nowadays, and so you can't do that anymore, and that's the great thing about not being a broker anymore. I just get to say whatever I want. It's fantastic. And so you can't, right? Because you got to know how this stuff works or partner correctly. You got to have a strategy, and frankly, it's staggering the number of people who have, their strategy is, I have no strategy. And so main thing to know is that the fully insured carriers are not doing it for you. And we're talking about the C forms. This is the pain point, right? This is what you guys likely have just went through. The difference between the B form and the C form is this middle section here where that middle orange arrow is. And what it looks like is this. And this is where we get into our good friends, the codes, right? There are some poor souls I've actually heard, and I sincerely hate this. There's a lot of people that thought that there really weren't any alternatives but to do this by hand. That's tough, and we'll talk about, but that's not right. There's a lot of actual employers who paid a vendor to do it for them, and then found out that by doing it for them, what they meant was that they'll mail merge it. You go put in all the codes, and so hopefully people in this next year will know a little bit different. But the codes for line 14, line 14 is all about the offer of coverage, what you offered. The easiest way, the way that we would train employees to understand this is that it doesn't have anything to do with what they did about it. If they selected coverage, if they waived, that doesn't matter. What did you offer? And you've got to understand that what is the IRS interested in? They're interested in the fact, did you offer the right type of plan at the right type of cost? That's what line 14 is all about. Had offered for the entire month, and there's some transitional rules, and there's all kinds of moving parts and pieces of whether or not I want to use a qualifying offer, and there's different ways. There's multiple answers to the same question, which, is confusing, but there's some give and take, and there's a lot of movement in that area. Line 15 becomes where you say, okay, well, this is how much it cost, and then line 16 is what did they do about it? Were they employed? Were they not employed? And what specifically that they're going to be looking for is that something has to be filled out on every single month of line 14. And so if you offered coverage, then they're looking for, is it affordable? If you didn't offer coverage, 1H was no offer of coverage or no offer of coverage for that entire month, they're looking, did you have a reason for not offering it? Were they not employed? Were they part-time? Were they in a waiting period? Or were they covered? Or if none of those things, was it affordable? Which again gets into a complicated, in all their brilliance, as you guys know this, they said, let's make affordability based upon household income. Anybody ever hired an entire household? Okay, so that's who's writing this stuff is incredible. But obviously, and if you've gone through this, you know about the affordability safe harbors, and we could spend a day talking about affordability safe harbors. But little things that why it is critically important, in my opinion, to work with someone who understands employee benefits in these details. This is something that, honestly, a lot of attorneys don't know. How do I know that? Because they call us and ask the question. That's how I know. That an affordability safe harbor actually has to be applied to an entire class of employees, or it can't be applied to any of them. So what that means is if you had 100 employees, that if you use some type of affordability safe harbor and it worked on 99 of them, but not one, you cannot use it on the other 99. Now, are they going to catch that? I don't know. None of us know. But the question is, do you want to do it correctly, and are you going to work with somebody who knows how to do it correctly? Codes vary on a number of things, just a couple little things, like if you're part-time or full-time or part-time benefit eligible, or if you were on the plan or off the plan, or if you waived the plan, and what type of plan was offered, and if there's transitional relief or safe harbors or initial measurement periods, or if there's limited non-assessment periods or multi-employer, and it goes on and on and on. Incredibly complex. Anybody do this by hand? Whew. God bless you. That's amazing. There's a lot of resources on our website that you can get that will help you in a variety of different ways. The big question, like the way that the whole industry, the way that I saw it evolve, right, is that employer clients, they figured out, okay, this reporting is not going away. We're actually going to have to do this. And we typically partner with hundreds and hundreds of brokers, as well as tons and tons of CPAs. I got somehow on a CPA talking circuit, and so we ended up doing a lot of work with CPAs, and so we've seen this entire thing evolve. Employer clients do what they always do when they get in a bind and they don't know what to do. They went to their consultants and they said, what do we do about this? Well, the consultants picked up the regs, right? And they read, and they went, what? And the CPAs did the same thing. I have no idea what it is that they're talking about. I've been in employee benefits almost 20 years. The first time I picked up the regulations, the instructions for the reporting, I read it for 4 straight weeks, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And it's not for lack of effort. You can't understand what it is that they're talking about until you get a huge, broad amount of information and understanding of what they're trying to get right. You go, oh, okay, I understand what they're referring to here and all that. And so what did these advisors do? They said, well, payroll companies, they probably do a really good job for this. So the vast majority of employers went to payroll companies. Well, without beating up on payroll companies, and it's difficult not to, because they're learning, a lot of them. Some payroll companies, let me say this first, did a pretty good job. Okay, I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying the vast majority of them, and if you went there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It just did not go very well. They don't really understand employee benefits. They learned later that it turns out when people call you, they want you to call them back. Who knew that? And they didn't staff appropriately. And so what ends up happening is that the employer spent a lot of money. They spent a ton of money, actually, specifically for one piece of what they typically offer, which is variable hour tracking, right? You have to be able to track your part-time employees to figure out if you need to offer them coverage. Right? Everybody understands that? Okay. People are paying between $1 and $3 per employee per month. Well, the main question I would tell you, I would just recommend that you think about is, do you have tons and tons and tons of employees that are somehow working between 27 and 33 hours or something, and you don't know who's full-time and who's not? If so, you need to be on a very robust system that's talking to one another and that's getting that taken care of you. For the other 95% of you, which it really is about that much, you can do it a different way. We actually have a tool that we're going to just give it away. And so basically everything that a client can do to track their variable hour employees that they have to do in an electronic system, they can do on their own desktop for free. So that's part of our evil scheme to implode the payroll industry, which sounds like a big goal. But no, we're not going to do that. But it is very helpful to employers. For the vast majority of employers, they can do that a different way. So the main thing that I think a lot of employers are going to do as they come into this next year is ask a whole lot more questions than they did in the past. But the basic understanding now is, of course, is the reporting more payroll-oriented or is it more benefits-oriented? So you think about what type of payroll information is needed to fill out the forms, to get it all done, the codes, everything. You've got to know company name and address and an EIN and basic company information. And of course, you have to have payroll, who was full-time, who was part-time, and all that. And that is a key piece that payroll companies have. But the reason that benefit advisors are more involved is all the other things that are necessary as to whether or not this is the first year and what's your renewal dates and who is enrolled and what affordability safe harbors are we using, how's transitional relief working, what is minimum essential coverage, what is minimum value coverage, how do these codes work, all these different things, and it goes on and you get the point, right? And you guys have already, the vast majority of y'all have been through this one time already. And so it's a challenging situation. And once you get through, of course, you end up with these forms, and then the forms are out to the employees, and then you have to deal with what the reality, understanding the codes, because when you give an employee a form, they're going to ask a question about it. You have to be able to answer the question. And so that's what we see a lot of. The main thing I would say there is just make sure you partner correctly, however it is that you're getting it done, to make sure that you can actually get those questions answered. One of the things, we had a pretty novel idea that we did for our clients. We said, hey, it'd probably be a good idea for a human being to actually look at these things before they go to the client. It turns out that was a pretty good idea because a lot of times they're just wrong. And the reason that they're wrong is the client forgets to tell you that they actually did offer coverage. They told you how much it cost, but they didn't say that they actually offered it to an employee. And so everything's messed up. And so any type of review process is really a good idea. In my opinion, you can only do so much with technology, because if somebody puts in the wrong information, you're going to get the wrong output, and you need someone who's intelligent enough to look at it and go, that's not correct. And so we get all the way through, and then ultimately we're ending up with two penalties, right? We have an A penalty and we have a B penalty. For this year, the A penalty that's the $2,000 penalty. It's $173.18 per employee per month, that if you did not offer minimum essential coverage to at least 70% of the full-time employees. And how do they figure that out? They're going to figure it out because of this form right here. This is the 1094C form, excuse me. And off on the left-hand side is simply where it's checked of when you offered coverage and when you didn't offer coverage. And if you didn't offer minimum essential coverage that month, they're going to go, okay, well, how many FTEs did you have? Here's the penalty. Here's what you owe. Does that make sense? This is where it's calculated, though. The B penalties are a whole lot more complex. And honestly, we really can't get all the way into it. I will help you understand this, though. The way that overall the B penalty is going to work is that if you did not offer coverage to a full-time employee, okay, or frankly anyone, you have a 1H. You did not offer coverage. And of course, there's nothing in line 15 of that 1095C. The next thing the IRS is asking, well, do you have a reason for not offering them coverage? Were they not full-time? Were they not even employed? Were they in a waiting period? And if you go, no, by saying no to those things, you're actually saying they're actually full-time. And then they're going, okay, well, do you have an affordability safe harbor? No, we just didn't offer them coverage. And that does happen a good bit of time, actually, because of varying situations. Then what has to happen is that employee would have to have gone to the exchange and got a subsidy for that month. So if it was July through the end of the year, we did not offer them coverage, just one H on that 1095C form for them. There's no cost. There's no reason we didn't give them coverage. If they then went to the exchange and got a subsidy, you would end up getting a penalty for those months. Okay, so how are you going to know that? That is why I believe that they actually will figure out how to coordinate this data, that they have a plan for doing it, because there's no way to enforce the B penalty otherwise. Does that make sense? So, you know, this is a little bit of the situation that we're in. Typically, we get into, it's very easy to get into politics, right? When you start talking about ACA. And the reality of, in my opinion, is that nobody really knows as to what's going to happen or what will end up change. And, well, I mean, ultimately it all comes down, it's politics, right? And the problem with politics, it's like even the word, politics, and poly means what? Many, right? It's like that. And ticks means what? Voracious bloodsuckers. That's right, sir. Thank you. Many voracious bloodsuckers. That's exactly right. And so that's the situation we're in. And so we deal with what we deal with whatever it is that we've got. So as you're in the middle of the situation, you've got a handful of different ways that you can get after that as an employer. The first is you look at a payroll company. Okay, some have done a good job, right? They tend to be very expensive because they're charging a lot for that variable hour tracking. Now, if you're a hospitality group and you have the money to do it, go get a system that integrates everything. You're having people all over the place. You need that. You need to know what's going on. If you're not, and you just want to spend the money, then go for it. Do that. Do a big enterprise type system. Otherwise, there are different ways to get at it. Some of the, like what we do, and the more standalone, we consider ourselves like an app that can plug into any and every situation, which we've done a really good job with Cypress. And so brokers report major issues, major issues. There's actually a great blog, it's hilarious, is a real life situation to where we had a broker and a payroll company were trying to help them, and the light goes on for the broker. They realize that they've paid all the money to the payroll company, yet the broker's going to have to do all the work. And he wasn't happy. It was a bad day for him. Okay, so online enrollment systems, that's another option. Online enrollment systems, they have all the eligibility data, but they don't have a lot of the other stuff. We actually have an online enrollment system that we actually partner with, interestingly enough, to do their ACA reporting. Now, it can have some of the benefits, though. If you already have a vendor that you're working with that you like, that can be a good thing. It can be expensive. It might not be expensive. Sometimes there's some of them that are free, but you get what it is that you're paying for. So, but it is an option. It is something that you certainly should consider, you know, as an employer. There are e-filing only vendors. Unless you are so incredibly simple in your plan design, it's easy to go, oh wow, it's just $1 per employee. Well, yeah, it is. And all they're doing is they're taking a spreadsheet, you fill it in, and then they press submit. I mean, that's it. That's all they're doing on their end. You're doing all the coding and everything. And if you feel like that's one of the things that you want to do with your life, I'd really recommend you get a hobby. I mean, you need to do something else with your life. You guys, time is just, it's a tough way to live. CPAs, this was really interesting. I might have mentioned to you that I got on this circuit where I was talking to CPAs. And so I'm doing the continuing education, and they are hammering me with CPA-like type questions. And we're just going at it for this code, that code, that code. And then HIPAA compliance comes up. And so we got into this big national argument debate on video about whether or not you had to be HIPAA compliant. What they don't realize, as well as a bunch of payroll companies, not all of them, but a lot of them, is that you have to be HIPAA compliant to do ACA reporting. Why? It's because for payroll data, there is an exception that if a Social Security number is attached, it's not considered protected health information. You don't have to be HIPAA compliant to do payroll. There is no similar exception for ACA reporting, because when that Social Security number, which it has to be, is tied to a medical plan enrollment, that's PHI. We didn't make the rules, that's just how it is. And so they went, huh, and they're almost none of them are HIPAA compliant. So any CPA out there, if you had a CPA or if you know of that, you need to bring that up, because obviously as a plan sponsor, who's on the hook for that? You are, not them. I mean, they will be too, but you primarily, and it's going to be your situation to have to figure out. Benefit broker, it's complex to be a benefit broker. And so to do this on top of everything else, some of them pull it off pretty well. Some of them go, eventually I got to go home. I can't work, 100 hours a week. I can only work like 85. And so that's, some of them are able to pull it off, but others not. And there's a lot of people who just simply partner with organizations like ours. We tend to be very broker-centric, just simply because that's the only thing I've ever known. And that's how we like to do it. We like to plug in to any payroll company, any medical plan, whatever the situation is, multiple EINs. It's much more complex. And with an overall strategy that we believe that technology isn't the answer. You got to have a piece of technology to help, but service is the answer. Returning somebody's email and telephone call, it turns out it's quite valuable. They really like it when you do that. And I think that's it. How are we doing? Any questions? I'm always reluctant to, because you have no idea. Awesome. Well, it's obvious that I did such a thorough job that there is a question. Okay, go ahead.
We just saw a couple of days ago that they are going to assess penalties.
Mm-hmm.
But are we misunderstanding what the penalty is? Like you just mentioned that the penalties that we knew about, the 2,000 to 3,000, I've seen things like if you didn't complete your form correctly, it's going to be $250.
Right. Now you're talking about for not getting the forms out. Yes,
no,
absolutely.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about them not, they went out, but they may not have been correct.
Okay. You're fine this year. We're working under something they call good faith effort. You're fine this year. Now, it has to be a true good faith effort, which it sounds like obviously you did. I mean, if you actually did work, if you filled out people's names and you go, 1B sounds like a good code. Let's just give everybody that one. That's probably not a good faith effort, and you're gonna have some interesting times here in about 3 months. And that ultimately is when we're going to figure out how good or how bad someone did with this. Is that well, case in point, right? So let's say that somebody was offered coverage, right? Because you reported them as having been offered coverage, and they went to the exchange and got a subsidy. When they do their taxes, the IRS wants that money back. That is where the rubber is going to meet the road. That is where they're going to call you screaming, going, "What happened?" And that's where we'll figure out where a lot of the little ticking time bombs are. A good question.
Another question on, and two things I'd like you to comment on. One is, effectively, has the ACA done away with what I would have always considered a non-eligible class, regardless of how many hours they worked? And secondarily, would you care to comment on any of the PCORI fees that are required?
Well, of course, the PCORI fees, are just, that's totally separate from the ACA reporting section of it, but, you had better do it. I don't know how you guys coordinate that, or if, because different people do it different ways. Sometimes. I don't know, Holly knows that. Yeah, I don't know either. But it is, of course, the fees, the PCORI fees are all completely separate. Has it gotten away with ineligible class? Sorta, in that if you hire someone and you intend for them to be full-time, then they have to be offered a medical plan if you're an applicable large employer. Now, there are rules, of course, about seasonal employees. There's also rules about people who work variable hours, which is what the measurements, right? So I don't know if you guys know this, there's 2 measurement periods to measure people that are hired for variable hour. One is a monthly measurement period, and one is a look-back period, okay? This will explain a lot of how much thought went into the regulations very quickly on the monthly measurement period. If I hire this gentleman right here on the 1st of May, and he's a variable hour employee, and I'm using the monthly measurement period, and he works all month, because I don't know how many hours he's going to work, and it turns out that he works 130 or more months, or 130 more hours at the end of the month, I have to offer him coverage at the 1st of that month. Not the next month, that month. All right, so I hired him on May 1st. He works all May, and I figure out, yeah, he did work more than 130 hours. Okay, I have to offer him coverage as of May 1st. You can't do it, right? And so a lot of people use the monthly measurement period incorrectly, and they offer it the next month. You can't do that. So that's why people end up using this the look back method, and you can actually pick up one of our cards if y'all want. It'll be released in about 2 weeks, where you can just kind of do that on your own. It's not that complicated as long as you set it up correctly. But yeah, you do end up having to track hours on those employees. All right. Thanks.
There you go. Thanks.
Thanks.
Great job.
Appreciate it.